Hello, and welcome to Real Estate Today. My name is Ed Cox, and my co-host is Maria Babicki. And we have a great show planned for you today. We're going to be talking about home inspections. And home inspections are an integral and an important part of purchasing and actually for the seller to sell their home. So we're lucky today in the studio that we have a local home inspector who will explain to us the importance and the value of a home inspection. So Maria, could you introduce us to our special guest and get the show started?
Yes. Our guest today is Roger Villa of House Calls. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you having me here to take the time to address that.
Yeah, we're so happy that you came here.
Well, thank you.
So how long have you been doing home inspections?
Actually, about 14 years. I started in 2006, after I retired from corporate.
What were you doing in corporate?
Actually, I was in sales. I was director of sales for actually it's Babicki now. It's called Novartis. It was a pharmaceutical company. I was in the plastics end of it, so. Yeah. And I took care of Western Europe, United States, and the Pacific Ring, so there's a lot of travel.
Yeah, so a little bit of a change. So how do you like it in your career?
I like it. Actually, it's kind of a result. When I first got out of college, I was in the concrete business in Florida for 5 years. I also had a home improvement contractor's license, and during summers in college, I worked construction. So I've always had kind of an interest in. And because of the job, my corporate job, we traveled or relocated 5 times. All the houses I've done, most every room in every house. So I kind of like homes, and I like woodworking and stuff. So it was kind of, I think, a natural step for me to go back into home inspections.
Yeah.
So if I wanted to become a home inspector, what are the steps?
The process is first you have to go to a school, and I think our school was 120 hours. It was 3 weeks, 5 days a week. After that, you take the test at the end of the school. If you pass that test, you have to go find a certified home inspector that you can apprentice for. You have to do 100 inspections under him. It costs you $200 an inspection, so it's $20,000 you have to pay the home inspector. At the end of that, he certifies that you did your 100 inspections. Then you can go take the state test. If you pass the state test, then you can hang out your shingle and go buy the equipment that's necessary and go into business. So it's about a year and a half. Between school and doing the apprenticeship, it's about a year and a half, 2 years.
And is there a license?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, you have to be licensed to be a home inspector.
What is included in the home inspection?
Well, everybody's inspection process is a little different. All I can do is tell you how I do mine. When a referral calls me or a potential buyer calls me, first of all, I get a little background on them. I want to know if it's their first home or if they've been bought homes before. If it's their first home, I try to take some of the angst out of it by explaining to them that we very seldom find huge problems, that most of what we're going to see is maintenance issues or upgrade issues. And then I go through my inspection process. And my process is I'll show up at the property 20 minutes, half an hour before everybody. I'll inspect the roof, photograph it. I'll inspect the outside of the home, and I photograph that, meaning I check the siding, I check the gutters, the downspouts, the trim on the windows, doors, steps, foundations, decks. And then I also photograph the property looking for any potential issues of water intrusion into a basement, whether the property may be sloped towards the house. At that point, everyone shows up. I meet the buyer. I review with the buyer the processes or the services that they've asked me to perform. And I do a visual inspection, which I detail for you shortly. I do radon air, radon water, potability, wood-destroying insects. And if there's any concern about special metals and water, we could do a special water test for that if they're interested, or if they're concerned about copper or lead or something like that. So at that point, I hand them a pad and pencil and invite them to follow me around. We'll start in the attic. When I get in the attic, I'll look for structural issues with the rafters, ceiling joists, the roof decking. I'll check insulation. I'll check ventilation. I'll look for mold. I'll look for water intrusion. I'll inspect any HVAC equipment that may be up in the attic, electrical boxes. I'll come down to the second story if it's a two-story home. I photograph every room in the house. I check all the floors, walls, ceiling, doors, and windows. I will run all plumbing and mechanicals attached to any room, meaning I turn on all the sinks, flush all the toilets, run the baths, the showers. So I'll do that for every room in the house. I'll work my way into the basement, at which point I will take the cover off of the electrical panel. I'll check the internal wiring. I'll check the external wire routing. I'll check incoming and outgoing plumbing, supply, and waste lines. I will turn on the furnace or the boiler, depending what the home has. I'll check its performance. I go back and check, make sure that every room is being delivered heat. Weather providing, if there's AC, I do the same thing for central air system. While I'm in the basement, I'll check for cracks in floors and walls, for water intrusion. I'll check for mold. Depending on the age of the home, I'll check for asbestos. I'll also check all the structural issues, the main carrying beams, support columns, floor joists. If I'm doing wood destroying insects, I will check the joist ends and sill plates. And then I work my way into the garage. So that's kind of the scope of the visual inspection.
And how long does this normally take? I know you're dealing with a wide variety of home sizes.
Average home, say 2,400 square feet, it's about 2.5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So then after you do all that, then you make a report?
Yes, after the inspection, if I do the inspection before noon, the realtor and the buyer will get the report the same day. If I do it after noon, they'll have it by noon the next day. And my report is a little different than most. It'll contain somewhere around 250, maybe to 300 photographs. My reports are in full color. All the pictures are. Also, when I issue the report, the first page they open up, and I do this specifically for the realtor, is a summary sheet. And on the summary sheet is all the items that we addressed, that we found during the inspection. Because my average inspection report is about 45, 50 pages. So instead of having to sift through all those pages, the summary report, you look at it and that tells you everything that, the negotiable items that are going to be that the realtor is going to be doing. So that's my basic report. During the inspection also, maybe a little differently the way I do things, I'll take both of the buyers and I make sure I take them downstairs and I show them how to shut off the electric, how to shut off the water, and how to shut off the heat.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, and especially if it's a gas furnace or a gas boiler, you don't shut anything off. You don't turn any switches on, don't turn any switches off. Just get out of the house with a cell phone, call a gas company. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so my next question was going to be, do you recommend that buyers attend? Well, obvious, I think you answered that it's really good if they did. But if somebody were from out of town, how do you handle that?
And I get a considerable amount of that. Most of the time, the buyers are there with a realtor, and that's ideal. Sometimes even the seller is there. That's more of not a rarity, but it doesn't happen as often. I try to make that a positive experience, because if the seller is there, then you can ask questions. How long has it been since this, or how old is that, or what's the last? So it can work to your benefit. In a case of, and I do a lot where buyers are either out of state or they're out of the country, and it may be just me and the realtor there. I'll do the inspection with the realtor. I'll make the report and I'll send it out. And then the next day I'll call the buyer, whether they're whatever state they're in or whatever country they're in, and I'll review the entire report with the buyer so that hopefully we can go through the pictures, and if he has any questions, it's almost like he was there, but not quite. But I make sure I review it with him.
So the one thing you just said is something about the sellers. If a seller was considering putting their house on the market someday in the future, would you advise that they maybe have their home inspection done before they even put it on the market?
Interesting question. Originally, we were told anyways in school that the home inspection was supposed to be for sellers, pre-sale inspection. And a seller would do that because then he would know what items need maintenance, what items may need some minor repair before he put it on the market, so he'd be ready. But it has turned that now probably 95% of the inspections are done by the buyers. Okay, I may be done in 14 years. Literally on two hands, I could count how many pre-sale inspections I've done.
Well, Maria and I had you pre-inspect a home
Yeah.
that we sold. And it's funny, the value of that was that our seller could actually pre-repair and get the home ready so that it was in a more saleable. The other thing is she really never, or the seller didn't know really where to turn the water off until you had told her. And then the other one was that we didn't even know that she was set up for a generator.
Right.
So that was actually something we could add into the description and make the house more valuable.
Yeah, I think there's several good reasons to do a pre-sale inspection. I don't know of any homeowner that goes down occasionally and takes the cover off their electrical panel to see if there's any double taps or any electrical issues. And they know that, we'll ask them when's the last time it's been serviced, and they'll know that, oh boy, yeah, I need to get that serviced. So there's a lot of benefits of having it done before you put the home on the market, because you get a lot of information that you normally, normal homeowners don't go down and check the furnace and check the electrical and check their plumbing and check the well system. So I think it's very beneficial to have it done.
The other thing too is you wouldn't be on a time constraint. If you were selling, you discovered something, you'd be at the you'd really have to hustle to get work done.
Right.
Or you could schedule it out, and when your contractor was available, you could get the work done.
And you could do it with contractors that you're familiar with and and their work is reliable and everything. So it gives you more time, and it also gives you the opportunity to select your own contractors.
So what does a home inspection cost? I know that there's lots of variation to that.
Let's say 2,000 square feet and under is somewhere, depending on where you are in the market and who the inspection company is somewhere between $350 and $400. A condominium, probably closer to $300. And then anything over 2,000 square feet is a multiplier. So I have a multiplier that I use, if it's a 3,000 square foot house or a 4,000 square foot house. And then obviously all the services are additional to the...
Services meaning like the septic and the radon?
Well, no, if you want radon air, radon water, wood-destroying insects, or potability tests done, those are additional.
Have you inspected a brand new house ever?
One, actually, yes.
And then the other thing is, how about somebody who's investing in a two-family? Is that an inspection you would do?
The Connecticut license for a home inspector can do up to 4 families, or a 4-family house.
Okay.
So I've done several 3-family, 2-family investment properties.
So you give a list of people as far as like if they want an insect inspection or something like that, termite inspection, you give a list of people they could go to, or you recommend just one particular person?
No, I try to recommend, most of the majors, give for them. Also, in retrospect here, I want to go back. When I talk to the customer on the phone to set up the inspection, included in the bottom, I send them a confirmation worksheet, I call it, and the realtor gets a copy of it too. And it names, obviously, the address, the time, the date, and on the bottom of it, they can click on and see one of my home inspection reports, so they get an idea what kind of work I do before the inspection.
Okay.
But yes, if I find issues I'll try to give them names of electricians, carpenters, plumbers, pest control companies, and so forth.
Okay. Do you actually tell them, like, if you think the house is a very good house, do you give them any advice on buying, or is it strictly you're just sticking to the inspection and giving them the facts that you see?
Yes. Well, okay, that's a very good question, because I have some issues with it. I used to be on the board of directors of ASHI, a local chapter. And one of the issues I have with home inspectors is some of them think it's their job to come in and describe as many negative things as they can about the house. That's not our job. Our job is to go in and show a buyer, or to explain to a buyer and inform him how the house works, how the systems work, how the structure works with the house. It's if there's new things that have been added, if there's custom cabinetry work, if there's custom woodworking, that gets mentioned. You tell them everything about the house. That means the good things and whatever issues you find, so that he has a complete picture of what the condition of the home. As far as recommending buying or not buying, that's totally out of our, at least in my opinion, I don't get involved in any of those conversations. I just want to make sure that he understands the condition of the home, how the systems work, and what kind of condition it's in, and what items need some attention, what items are okay.
And is there like a theme that certain you find certain issues that are more common to find in an inspection, where if the seller had known better, the house may?
Yeah, one of the the biggest issues that I find is extensions on downspouts. Water is probably the worst thing that can happen to a home. I mean, water intrusion is the most costly, the biggest problem the homeowner is going to have. And most commonly, at the end of the downspout, it just pours right next to the foundation, and they don't have leaders. So I explained to them that you want to keep water away from a foundation as far as you can. The grading should be so that the water slopes away from the house and doesn't enter the foundation. Some of the other common things are very few people have ever been inside the electrical panel. And oftentimes, especially in older homes that have had additions and remodels done, you'll find some double taps. Okay, not a huge issue, but you need to explain to the buyer what a double tap is, why the electrician does it, and that it needs to be changed. So those are probably two of the biggest things that we can find. Also, it's important for people that are buying a home that has a well. They may have previously been in a condominium, or they may have been in a renting, and they're used to city water. So if I see a well system, I make sure that gets explained, how that operation works, because it's a lot different than city water.
I think that's a really good thing, because you do see people who don't see wells or septics as positives, and when you really explain it and have a better understanding, then
yeah, there's
it's okay.
There's quite a few positive things about a well,
Yeah.
but yeah.
We're working with a house right now that has a downspout and then an extension that moves the water out, and it just this past storm became disconnected.
Oh boy.
The water poured down down the edge of the foundation. We had some water in the basement. There hadn't been water in the basement in a year, or almost a year. There was water. As soon as I walked out, I looked, I could see that the downspout. And
and another common issue with water in the basement is not only the downspout extensions, but if it's a contemporary home. A lot of contemporary homes are designed without gutters and downspouts,
right?
Just because architecturally that's the look that they want. And I note immediately, I'll tell a buyer that there's no gutters, no downspouts, and I would recommend that they install them, because then the water just comes off the roof, comes down in a sheet, and it's right next to the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
My home, when I bought it, did not have gutters. It's contemporary-ish, and I did put them on. Another guest who has been on our show put gutters on my house, but I never. It was recommended to me during the home inspection that I had,
yep.
And we put them on. Of course, not immediately after, but we did put them on.
Yeah, it's very helpful.
The one thing that I noticed before, when we're getting ready to list a house, I walk around and I see lots of extension cords, and I usually first of all, if I see lots of extension cords, I think that there's probably not enough outlets. Is that something that concerns you during an inspection?
Yes, I will certainly mention if I see an extension cord that's got 8 or 9 plugs and then there's more adapters. That's obviously not a very safe condition. The extension cord issue, really becomes kind of important when you get into the garage, because if
The next question.
if the automatic door opener is
That's-
connected to an extension cord, most towns say that's a no-no. They want to see a dedicated outlet.
Right.
So I will definitely write that up in a report and suggest that they, get their own, that each individual operator has a
dedicated
specified
extent.
dedicated outlet.
Right, okay. Trying to think of other things that,
Well, if I could ask you a question, because
Absolutely.
in certain areas of Connecticut, we're having issues with crumbling foundations. Could you give us a little information on that?
Yeah, that's a really terrible situation for the homeowners that are living in those homes. There's approximately, I recently went through a course and got certified by CFSIC to inspect those pyrite conditioned foundations. Approximately, I guess, 33,000 homes are involved. The important thing to keep, or a couple of things you want to keep in mind, the time period is 82, 83 to 2016. After 2016, that quarry was closed, so there's no issue. If the house was built in 2017 and on, there's no issue. If it was built before 1982, and if it was built before then, there's no issue. So that time frame is important. And the other the other thing to keep in mind is that problem is basically confined to a geographical area that is east of the river, kind of northeast in Connecticut. I don't know, I've never run into any issues west of the river, Simsbury, Granby, Avon, Torrington, Canton, Farmington, West Hartford, where there's been any issues like that. Okay, so it's a confined area, and there's also a time frame to keep in mind.
Okay.
so it just comes to mind just now, let's say somebody has a foundation in their, who's watching the show today, and they have a concern. Is that something they could call you about?
Yeah, I mean, I could go out and do the CFI SIC inspection. It's a separate inspection. It has to be done to meet the standards of SIC. But yeah, I'd be more than happy to go out and do an inspection.
Okay. And so, and that way, I always, once in a while you see a crack. Is there something that would help someone decide that it's just a crack and not?
Okay, yeah, that's a very good question. And I was just addressing this at a workshop I was doing for realty. Almost every foundation is going to have a crack in it, okay? And it depends on what type of crack, it depends the direction of the crack. If you have cracks, it doesn't mean that you have a pyrite condition. Most cracks, if you see a crack in a basement wall, the first thing you'd want to check is make sure the cracks are even. If one wall is out and and the other one's in, that describes a whole different issue. That may be a hydrostatic issue. If the top of the foundation isn't even, if you have a crack but one crack's higher than the other, that's usually kind of a settlement issue, so you want to address that differently. You may have cracks on windows, especially in the basement, come out to corners. That's kind of to be expected. So yeah, the cracks in the basement walls are not important. Obviously, if there's water coming in, then obviously that's going to be an issue. If they're out of alignment or one's proud of the other, then that's obviously something you'd want to refer to and look into. But almost every basement's going to have a crack somewhere.
What about antique homes? You do the
Antique homes is a whole totally different ballgame. Most are built on stone foundations. Some are stone and mortar. Some foundations are stone mortar with a brick topping that you'll see going around a home. So you're definitely going to have cracks in the stone and mortar, especially something that's 100 and some odd years old. And I do a lot of ancient home type inspections. So you have to look at that differently, because you have to be aware of the fact that back then the construction methods were different. You're going to see different issues in a basement in an antique type home. Okay, a lot of them have dirt floors. A lot of them, the posts are right in the dirt and they're not on concrete. So you have to address that with a whole different mindset, understanding how construction was done back then. And it's not just the foundation. Antique homes, the way they were built, balloon framing, the roofs are usually different, timbers are different. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that are different. And And I try to go over it with prospective buyers of antique homes. You're not going to find level floors and square doorways. You're not going to find plumb walls because, 160 years, things settle a little bit. So, they're a whole different kind of a ball game when you get to antique homes.
Well, as we're winding up the show, I really like your philosophy because it just sounds like you're basically informing people about their home, and if something happens to come up, then you explain that. And
I think it's very important for home inspectors their methodology. As you're inspecting a home, you got a prospective buyer and a realtor there. Like I said, if you find an issue, stop, explain it. Tell them why you think it happened. Tell them whether or not you think it's minor or a major issue. Maybe if they ask, you can give them a ballpark price on what do you think it's going to take to remedy that situation. But I think it's very important, you don't use words like that's broken or that's busted or that's all rotted out or, you walk by, for instance, you go down to the electrical panel, you take it off and you say to the guy, well, you got 2 double taps. Well, if you don't explain what a double tap is, that buyer, are you talking about dancing or what? What do you mean? What's a double tap?
Yeah.
So I think you have to explain everything and make it perfectly clear in a buyer's mind what you're talking about. Is it minor? Is it major? What happened? What is it going to take to fix it? And you have to address it because if you just walk by and say that's broken, and you don't explain it, for the rest of the inspection, the buyer's thinking, what does that mean? I mean, is that a $2,000 thing? Is it a $50 thing? Is it a $5,000? So yeah, it's critically important that you give as much concise, accurate information as you can, and all the good things, about a home.
In your inspections and other home inspectors that we've used, but we've had several of yours. The photos tell so much when they go through the inspection. They get a bunch of information, and then they go back and they get the book, and then they start reading it. But they can refer to the photos, so it makes them remember what it was you were talking
Absolutely.
about.
If I find an issue in the home, I go up and I photograph it. Obviously, I'll do a close-up of it. In the report, you'll see arrows or circles. You'll see a description of what it is, a leak in the corner or pipe's got a leak. And then on the summary page, wherever comment is, you're going to see a page number. If you go to that page number, you're going to see the photograph of what we're talking about.
Right. And
that's how my reports are set up. So I think it makes it very understandable, easy reading for both the realtor and the buyer.
I just, we've only got a little bit of time left, but there was one thing, people are always talking about the plugs in the kitchen and
GFIs.
And what's up with those?
Okay. GFI, most of the older homes probably don't have GFI. So I'm just going to recommend as an upgrade you put it in, but you're not going to ding a house because it's got a regular receptacle. The only time you're going to ding them for a GFI is if it's got a GFI and it doesn't work. Then obviously that's an issue.
Okay, got it.
Okay. Are there any quick tips you would give to sellers as to obvious things, like perhaps like you said that water intrusion is such an issue, such a common issue? So.
Yeah, make sure you got extensions. Make sure you check your basement and you don't have any water coming in. If you got a contemporary home, see if gutters and downspouts are necessary. Sometimes the overhang or the soffit on a contemporary home is long enough or sticks out far enough where it isn't going to be an issue. But you want to check when's the last time you had your air conditioning service, last time you had the furnace service. You just want to kind of check the normal stuff that you normally wouldn't do, but if you're going to sell a house, those are going to be questions that are going to be asked of you. When was this service? When was that service?
Okay. And
Lex.
And then there's some things that come up quite often, and I'm saving this till the show, but sometimes people are freaked out because there's a radon system in the house or there's a sump pump. What's your thought about that?
A radon, if you find radon, it should never be a reason not to buy a house.
Yeah.
You pay, the buyer pays for the inspection. The fix for that is relatively simple, relatively inexpensive, that the seller's going to take care of. So, once the system's installed, the efficiency of it is unbelievable. So radon air should never be a reason not to buy a house, nor radon water, because there's a fix for both.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
And a sump pump?
Sump pump is not an issue as long as it's installed properly and it's vented out properly. It's not an issue either.
Okay. All right.
Great.
Thank you so much for coming to the show. We
Well,
really
thank you
appreciate
very
it.
much. I enjoyed it. I appreciate it.
We could ask you a bunch of other questions too, but we're out of time. So thank you all for tuning in. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.